So, welcome back to the Defiant Spirit podcast. I want to jump into a conversation today with my now podcasting partner, even though you have your own podcast, my son, and somebody I respect deeply, especially on the issue we're going to talk about today, Yehuda. Welcome back, Yehuda.
Thank you for having me again.
Again, we're just cranking out podcasts left and right. So, we're just going to jump from topic to topic. And today, in this conversation, we're going to leave the Enneagram behind, or maybe not. It seems to always follow us around. And let's get into a different podcast, which you're also qualified to talk about, which is the journey of a man. I have shifted my practice, as you know, around, although I still counsel women, predominantly I'm coaching men. And the shift has been very profound for me. I love my role as a therapist, as a logotherapist, helping find meaning, helping people heal. But I've really loved moving into coaching, and I see coaching really works with men. And the difference is coaching, you still have the therapeutic experience, but then it's more forward facing. It's more moving towards goals, and it's a structured process to get there. So I'm giving my guys programs to do based on the guy, what he needs. But there's curriculum that's developed, and there's journaling prompts, and there's exercises, and there's a lot to do. What I've seen though is even though I offer a menu of choices to guys, it's starting to really get narrow, and it's coming down to one primary topic that every guy seems to resonate with. And keep in mind, most of my coaching clients are north of 40, but I think it'll resonate with you. And that is becoming a king in your life. So I want to talk today, not about becoming a king, although that's part of the conversation, but the steps along the path to get there. Because I do think that becoming a king is both not biological, what's the word? Chronological. There's a certain time and place to become a king, and you really can't become a king prior to this time and place. And then it's also a mindset. It's also a set of choices. So just because you're a certain age doesn't make you a king, but it's a combination of that hitting that age and making the right choices, and then you move into this next space. So you know quite a bit about this idea of male development. What are your thoughts on, as a man striving towards and becoming a king? What does that do for you?
I think it's a process we have to go through whether we like it or not. And no matter what field and career we choose to go into and whatever our life path is, it's a process that's an unspoken, innate thing that's occurring within us as men. So we might as well talk about it, because whether we want to resist it or lean into it, it's there, it's happening. We go through this exploration period, and then this more refining of our character, and this mastery stage, and then finally into king in our kingdom, and then sage, and then we die. And there's this like unconscious process happening with all men across all time. Maybe today it looks a little bit different than it did, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, but it shows up in all of our stories, and now we're living out that story. So let's get into it.
There's nothing like talking about becoming a king when you're holding Momo, right? A little lap dog. I mean, this is like the best dog. And in a million years, I never would have thought I would have liked this dog. I imagined the king's dog is a big German shepherd or something, but nope. Momo is the king's dog. So it's keeping me grounded, keeping me real. Let's talk about the stages to get to a king. So I draw this from a lot of different thinkers, but one of my favorites is Alison Armstrong. Have you read Alison?
Yeah, I was listening to one of her books a few days ago.
So she's got a bunch of books. She's a specialist on male-female relationships or development. And she has this concept, and it's not hers. It comes from archetypal psychology, but she really has made it accessible. Her book is called Amazing Development of Men. If you haven't, it's actually a better listen. Sometimes, the read is the important way to go, but this is a listen to version, which I think is a live lecture. Anyways, she talks about the 4 primary stages of a man's journey, maybe with a 5th. A page, right? a knight, a prince, and a king. And then on the other side, a king, which is a briefer, different kind of stage, is the sage. But, and the page is a child, it's a boy. It's boyhood. It's up to like that 12, 13-year-old time frame. And that's one phase. Then you go into the knight stage. And I want to talk now, because I really want to focus this podcast, since you're in this stage, of what does it mean to be a knight? And we're going to define that. And then what does it mean to move into the prince stage? And we'll save the king stuff for another conversation. So describe to me what it's like to be a knight. What does that mean?
It's to experience adventure. It's to live in the eternal present where everything is possible and you're exploring your options and you're having all these experiences. You're almost very much taking in, and not in a bad way either, in a very healthy way of experience. You're not a boy anymore. You may not be a father yet. You may not be business owner yet, whatever you want to do. You may not be solidified in your profession, but you're in this in-between stage where you're exploring, what is this world that I live in? Who am I? What is it like to be in a relationship? What is it like to grow and deepen my relationships with my family? What is it like to explore the world and different cultures and learn new skills and hobbies? And it's a very exciting time. And I think it can be a very confusing time as well. But I think it's a very exciting time to be a young man.
I think that's a big part of it. Excitement. There's energy, right? Testosterone. Some of this is just biological, physiological. You're going through this time where there's an upsurge in testosterone and energy, and so that's a key characteristic of being a knight, and to express it, right? Because it's pent up. It's like got to get out. And so it's super important if you're in that night period. What age are we going to put on the night?
Let's call it what? 16 to 28, 26.
Yeah, I mean, like it can
That's
go
on
on.
that's on the later end of things.
Yeah, but it's a bell curve.
Yeah.
And some guys ride the tail as long as they can. Some guys ride this tail like into their 60s and 70s. That's a problem. But yeah, like it's the late teens, 20 version. And again, every guy's different. So some guys enter it earlier, leave it earlier, but that's sort of the bell curve. So let's just call it, for the sake of argument, 20s. Okay, it's 20 something version of you. What's a knight driving at in the 20s? Like if you're going to put at the top of the pyramid, what's the drive?
I would say identity. I think it's really a building stage of sorts, not in the way that a man might build to provide for a family and create wealth, but building in terms of like I said, just absorbing. You're almost like a sponge to your experiences at this point in life. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'd say achievement too. It's a big time where men want to just grow who they are. They're not a boy anymore, but they're in this like in between stage.
Yeah, they don't have the responsibilities of the prince. They have the energy of the page, right? They're in this middle area. It's like it's a very fluid space versus some of the other stages later on, which are much more definitive. In the Mishnah, one of the ancient teachings in Judaism, there's a passage that says there's a time for everything. Like you're 5 years old, you're 10 years old, you're 15 years old, studying and whatever. And then it says your 20s, and the word that's used is tirdof. It's time to pursue. And the rabbis ask, pursue what? And they just say pursue. And to me, that's always been real telling of that night. Pursue everything. Pursue anything. Just pursue. I see guys, maybe you see this too, that resist the pursuit, right? They try and contain it. They try and almost jump over the knighthood to get to prince. Settle down, settle in. Have you met these guys?
Yeah, I have. I think we also have to remember that at the time that was written in the Mishnah, people were pursuing in a very different way, and our time scale, I think, has opened up as far as ages go, where men are pursuing for longer now before they enter the princehood.
Mm-hmm.
We're living longer. We're not in a world where men are getting married in their late teens anymore, at least in the majority. I think that age has shifted up a little bit, and so that period of pursuit has expanded a little bit more.
That's
And
a good point.
I think some people want the more traditional life of having everything set, like almost like dipping their toe into knighthood
Mm-hmm.
and saying, "Okay, I'm ready to be a prince. Like I don't need to do this. I don't
Right.
need to go through it." When I think it's something that everyone needs to go through
Mm-hmm.
in your own way.
Yeah, for sure. You bring up a really good point, is that a lot of guys are not even getting married in their 20s anymore. Like, forget teens. I don't know what the average age is, but I know when I was doing weddings, it was creeping. And I think it entered into the 30 something range. And there's a consequence because you stretch this phase too long and it starts to do some damage. I counsel a lot of guys who have been in knighthood, but now they're in their 30s, and it starts at some point it loses its luster and goes from excitement, as we talked about, to a sadness. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I have. I think it serves its purpose when it's there and when it's what you're supposed to be going through.
Mm-hmm.
But then there is that point, and I think we can all. I haven't gotten there yet, but I think people in their early 20s have glimpses of princehood more than they do in their late teens.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, the thing that you were doing that's so exciting and so adventurous, you know, maybe it's fun, but there's other things that you'd rather be doing at this point. And you're still experiencing knighthood, but I think getting stuck in it is getting stuck in what it means to be a knight in the way that you've done it in the past. I think you can carry the knight energy into princehood as long as you bring it in an evolved way. So where it was partying and living it up freshman and sophomore year in college for me or people my age, now it's still having fun, but in different ways, and it's learning how to evolve as a knight and not just stay stagnant in that one definition, because that's not really what a knight is. A knight moves with the tide. They explore, they test limits, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they push and see what direction they can move in. And so if they're only experiencing knighthood in this one limited capacity of partying in college, then is that really a full and true lived knighthood?
No, it's such a good point. Just because you're in the age doesn't mean you're living the best, the highest quality of the energy. And a knight is pushing limits, and yeah, it's all, you use the word fun, 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 fun. It's got to be fun. Like knighthood is all about having fun. It's not fun after a certain point when you're not going on adventures. It's just another Saturday night at another frat party doing the exact same thing, rinse and repeat. That's not knighthood. That's something else.
I think people misuse the word fun and think that it means pleasurable, because a lot of those experiences of the night are very pleasurable experiences. It's fun to go out and have a good time. It's also fun to start a podcast. I mean, I wouldn't have said that maybe, when I was a freshman in college
I
and
mean, when you were on the roof dancing with like cowboy boots and shorts.
in my jorts. Yeah. That was fun. See, that was,
That was not fun to watch, but yeah, it was fun.
I'm sure it wasn't, but you have to admire the knight in his element.
That's right. You were doing the night thing, and at the time, that was pushing new boundaries, new limits.
Sure. But it evolves. And no, I may not be in princehood, but yeah, like I'm going on a road trip. We're doing a Jewish leadership retreat to Salt Lake City for spring break.
Mm-hmm.
Now, are there more, I guess, fun versions of spring break that I could be doing? Yes, but this is fun in its own way, and it's moving with what that means, because it's not just pleasurable activities.
Right.
It's what ignites your spirit in an exhilarating way. That's fun.
And it's pulling you towards princedom, right? Because it's no longer just Fort Lauderdale, which again has its time and place, but now it's the Fort Lauderdale kind of spring breaky vibe. But now it's, you're going to do a leadership thing in a new community, and that's the pull to princedom, right? So this pull towards other, and I think that's a big shift from knight to prince, is the role of me. And every knight is supposed to be me, 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 I. It's like, it's natural. It has to be that way. The problem is if it continues on, I, past a certain point, it moves into real selfishness. And so the pull to prince is about other.
Well, I used the sponge analogy before, but if a sponge isn't soaking up the knowledge and the experience and the fun and the adventure, when it comes time to start churning out water, whatever it means, whatever you're giving in return, you'll have nothing. It's supposed to be a time of absorbing, right? You're experiencing, and then you start to shift. Right now you've been functioning as an intake machine of just an intake of experience, and then you turn it around and you start putting out, and you start producing.
So true. Viktor Frankl talks about self-transcendence. He and Maslow were contemporaries, and Maslow's famous pyramid, the basic needs and emotional needs, etc. And you get to the top. Remember what the top of the pyramid is? You're a psych major.
Self-actualization.
Right. The best version of you. And literally they got into debates. I think I even saw them online recorded. And Frankl said the next highest has to be self-transcendence. The only way to be the best version of myself is to go beyond myself. And that's the shift from self-actualization. Yeah, is part of the night journey. Then you got to move into self-transcendence. But that is self-transcendence assumes there's a self. And that's what knighthood is about. Like you already said, putting on these masks, trying on these roles, exploring this route. Do I want to be? That's why I hate when kids go to college and they say, I'm a psych major. I hate that our universities make you declare your path before you get there, as opposed to try it all on the first 2 years and then you pick a path.
And most people that I talk to, when they're like, oh, what are you doing after college? Their response is, yeah, I didn't use my degree for what I wanted to actually do. Or, yeah, I ended up switching my whole path entirely. It's great for people who are 18 going to college and princehood is at least in sight, right? They don't know exactly what they're going to do from here to there, but they know med school, doctor, law school, lawyer. They have that direction. A lot of people don't, and a lot of people need this time to explore and to learn and to soak in information and to learn critical thinking skills, but they don't exactly know what they want to do with it. And you can't expect someone who's, in that intake period to know exactly what their output's going to be.
And I think that there's a big problem today because I hear lots of kids declaring young age. I mean, it's one thing, to be a kid and say, I want to be a firefighter. It's another thing to then start grooming the kid to do whatever it takes, not firefighters, but to be a doctor, to be a lawyer, to be at an early age. And then you lock in your identity. And then people don't even know why they're pursuing it half the time. Is it because my dad wanted me to, or he was, or my grandfather, or the world around me, or because this profession pays a lot and you got to have a period of knighthood where you just ride away from all of that.
Yeah, one of the guests that I had on my podcast, he had this idea of like, oh, I'll go to med school, and then realized that he wanted to start a consulting business, and that was his calling, and may not be the path that other people had like laid out for him clearly, but it was the more meaningful one, and he ultimately decided to choose that. And so we can't just assume that what a kid, an 18-year-old kid wants to do because this is what he's been told and this is how he should go about it, is actually his life calling. You have to give them the opportunity to figure it out and to soak in the experience, to live adventurous. Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking of all these things that a knight has to do before he can figure out what it is that he wants to give in that later stage of princehood.
And I'm just telling all the parents listening, it is a major mistake to try and get your kid to skip over knighthood, because it's a necessary part of the development. And I would even argue that if a kid does not want to go to college, I think it is a mistake to make them go to college, because they end up conforming to fit into somebody else's life, which is why college kids are getting inebriated, right? That's the only way that they can make this work. I hear it all the time, like from certain kids, they shouldn't be there. It's not what they want to do. They want to be an entrepreneur. They want to go to the army. They want a trade school. And we're forcing them into this box because we think we're doing them a favor. I don't think we're doing them a favor at all. And I see that they pay serious consequences down the road for skipping over knighthood.
Yeah, I think it's an important stage to touch on. I look back and I was thinking about this actually recently. I remember I went to LA and I went to see some friends and my grandparents. And I asked my grandparents, I was like, hey, can I take your car and go down to San Diego for a few days? And they kind of like looked at me like I was crazy, but also at the same time were like so appreciative of like the just like wildness and the adventure energy that was around. And I spent some time with them. I went down to San Diego, came back. I think we can learn a lot from being around knights in particular. I think especially older people really are fueled by their radiant energy that is just so go go go. And something in the notes of Alison Armstrong's stages of male development is relationships often take a backseat to ambition.
Mm-hmm.
But I think relationships can be in partnership with the knight, and other people can really be fueled by his just sporadic.
As long as you don't try and shackle a knight to you. Your grandparents were wise, because if they said no, they wouldn't have got the best version of you. They got the best version of you because you were with them, anticipating the adventure. Then you got onto your white horse and rode down to San Diego. Then you came back and you were the best version of you because you discharged that energy. Otherwise, you would have been resentful. You would have muted yourself, and they would have felt that. They were wise.
That's interesting.
And that's why we got to give knights permission. But any woman listening who's with a knight, hear me loud and clear on this. Do not shackle your knight. It doesn't mean that you don't have a right to have expectations, to be treated with dignity. He shouldn't cheat on you, all those things. But I've heard this so many times where the female partner is ready for more, and the knight says he's not ready for more, and she doesn't believe him. And he starts committing to more prematurely, and the resentment grows, and the relationship suffers. And it's just different. Men and women are different, and a man needs to be ready to settle into princehood. Nobody can make him get ready.
So how does a man prepare, and how does a man become ready?
First and foremost, it's doing the thing, not skipping over the thing. Guys who skip over knighthood end up becoming wannabe knights at age 50, and there's nothing fucking worse than seeing a grown-ass man trying to be a knight. Doesn't mean you can't have knight energy. It doesn't mean you can't have adventure. But you know, it's a cliche. You see that guy at the club in a college town, and it's like, what's the old dude doing here, right? You don't want to be that guy. So
You can still go wild and get tattoos across your back, but it's different than being a knight in that stage.
It's different than going to the bar, to find another knight or another young maiden to be with. So don't skip over. First of all, I would say that's number one. Number two is to start the process of self-transcendence. Like, what do you want to transcend towards? And that's coming back to what the hell are you doing all these adventures for? What are you looking for? And to start to, I mean, I think I see you going through this right now, right? What's my why? What's my purpose? So I've watched you. The early Knight wasn't asking these questions. Now the older Knight is still going on his white horse, but now he's saying, why am I going here? Like, what do I want to accomplish? And that's the progression.
And I definitely tried to skip over knighthood. I remember it wasn't a podcast, but I was trying to do something similar at age 17. And I think it really was helpful and beneficial to where I was at the time. But I came to college and it was a rude awakening. And I slowly had to let go and realize that I need knighthood. I can't just go from page to prince. It's just not the way of the world. It's not the way of one's development. So I think a big difference between what it looks like to find purpose in knighthood and princehood is where validation comes from. And so in knighthood, it shows up as like the need for that like external validation, and not in a bad way. Again, you're a sponge. You're looking from the inside out. The prince says, I'm here, I'm me. I'm going to look inward. What does the outside need? What can I offer? And whether or not I'm being, validated, because the prince goes through a very big period of putting their head down and grinding and doing the thing. But they're not motivated clearly by, all that validation in the way that the knight is. They have their purpose. They're secure in that.
Yeah. And you asked what you can do. I think surround yourself with some of those people. And I see you doing that too. You have friends now who are, if not princes, closer to princedom, readying for princedom. And so surrounding yourself with those people, because otherwise you end up as Peter Pan. Peter Pan, right, is the knight forever because he lives in Neverland and he surrounds himself with lost boys. And so he just flies around and around and around. And part of what he does to grow up, you remember the movie?
Oh gosh.
You should watch it. It's a deep teaching on moving from knight to prince. There's a scene when he's in Wendy's room and he wants Wendy. He wants something real, something deeper. And he's wrestling with his shadow. He's bouncing around her room and he's trying to catch his shadow. And finally he catches it and he's trying to put it on to reattach it to his body. And he's trying to do it with soap. And she basically says something like, silly boy, you can't attach your shadow with soap. You must sew it on. And to me, that's the shift from knighthood to princedom, is starting to grapple with my shadow, not just the fun stuff, not just the self-gratification, but what's the darker stuff going on in me? What's causing me? How do I look at that? How do I work through that? And not coincidentally, for him, it also took place around a woman.
Very interesting. Yeah, that's why, that whole idea of shadows, the reasoning behind my podcast title, Shells and Shadows. It's because I'm in a knight's, I'm just going to say knight's kingdom, but I'm in Nightville. That's what CU Boulder is. It is for the young men here. It is Nightville.
Yeah.
We're all knights around the round table on Shabbat dinners and all these, fun things that we do. And I think it's important for knights to also start transitioning into that period of integration of the shadow.
And that's the next stage.
Yeah,
the prince. Right. So let's talk about the prince. Today I wanted to just hit on the knight and the prince, and then I'll do another podcast for the king. So that call towards the prince, and you're really, even though you're only 22, you're further along the path certainly than I was. And I would say you're moving to princedom in a very rapid pace. The shadow, grappling with it, looking at it, going deeper, not wider. To me, that's a big shift from the knight to the prince. Can I go deeper, not wider? Can I go inwards, not outwards, which you said earlier? So that's a big shift.
Yeah, it is a big shift. It's about it's less about what's the word? Like achievement
Hmm.
of sorts. The knight's looking for wins in different areas, as he should. Whereas the prince is looking for mastery. They're looking to find so they've done their exploration. They know, at least have direction and clarity on what it is that they want to squeeze out from their sponge soaking up
Hmm.
period, and they master their skill set. They
Yeah.
put in their 10,000 hours. I think, from if I'm correct, in Armstrong's lecture, it said that this is a period of anywhere between what, 10, 15 years.
It's probably the longest period.
Yeah, it's what we say when we mean put in your 10,000 hours and you've mastered whatever it is your field is.
It's 30s, 40s. It can be even longer, I think, really. But it's that period of time when you're rooting down. You're putting down roots. You can't just keep going wide. Again, if you want to go deep, you gotta build relationship. There's a commitment. I haven't met anybody who becomes a king without being in a committed partnership. Never. It's never happened. So maybe they're out there. I don't know. So you're realizing that it's not just some like sociological phenomenon that we get married. There's a call. Every man knows that if he's going to be the best version of himself, he's going to have to defy his nature, which is to go wide, not deep. And so he needs that commitment to an other, then to a family, then to a community. And then, and that's part of the mastery too. It's not just profession.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm trying to relate to it. When I think of knighthood, I think back to experience. When I look to princehood, it's like that looking ahead feeling. So I'm more like trying to imagine what it is. Um,
What's your podcast? Like, yes, you're experiencing, but you chose a pod. You're not talking about like how to get laid at CU Boulder. You're talking about shells and shadows.
I wonder if there is such a podcast.
I don't know, but that's not your podcast. You're being called. Like there's a calling to go deeper, to wrestle with the shadow.
I think it's no coincidence as well that, yes, a lot of the guys that come on are knights. A lot of them are also like the later in life guys, the people who are late princehood.
Yeah, but every guy you've had on the podcast is either a knight moving or wanting to move towards princedom or a prince. I mean, Theo is right now in Israel serving. Like, yeah, it's an adventure. Yeah, but there's also this piece. I listened to the podcast that wasn't just about Theo's adventure. It was about serving something bigger than himself.
Right. So it's that gray area between knight and prince.
And you gravitate towards guys who are moving, I won't say prematurely, but early on, earlier than the average Joe moving towards princedom.
Yeah.
Same with Noah. I heard it too, right? There's this pull, go deeper, not wider. Serve. That's the biggest, that's one of the biggest one is serve, right? Serve something or someone bigger than yourself.
What was your point of switch from knight to princehood, if there was a defining moment or period?
That's a good question. I mean, it was certainly a period, but I guess we're all unique. But for me, Grandpa Shelley, your grandpa, was disrupted my journey because when I was 20, how old was I when he started to fall apart? Like, I was in my early 20s. I really started to watch him fall apart. And he was supposed to be moving towards the king, but he was running from it. And he just didn't want to do what it took to be a king. And I just decided I don't want to be like that. And so I think I disrupted my knighthood prematurely and really started to get serious about my life and pursue service. And that's when I went off to Israel and I decided to become a rabbi to serve. So for me, it was roughly around your age. I think that I was called to the next level. I wasn't there yet. And I would say I didn't get there until I married. For me, that was 27. Started my princedom years, certainly by 30, when I was putting down roots and, I had you. So there's a progression. I don't know. For me, it wasn't necessarily a definitive date, but it was more about the anti-king. Like, and that has consequences when you define yourself by the anti-king. I don't want to be that, um, because a king can't define himself against. He's got to, know what he's moving towards.
Yeah,
So,
that is interesting. I know you share it as like your experience, but I'm sure there's a lot of other guys out there who have had their process, I guess, interrupted by all sorts of things.
mhm,
I think the interruption is what gets the wheels turning.
mhm,
I really do. I think my interruption was a little bit earlier. I felt interrupted in many ways of my pagehood.
mhm,
I mean, when we moved to Israel, um, it was no more little boy,
mhm.
and I'm in college. Really, I've gotten to experience that, like, free spirited energy of just letting myself, like, let boys be boys. We say that, but really just like going out and doing my thing and enjoying life. And I caught myself. I really, for a few years there, 16 to 18, was really trying to move into princehood.
Mhm.
I wasn't interested in what knighthood had to offer. I'm glad I have gotten to experience it in my time here, because I think you need it. You need it. It's substance. It fuels your fire. You're gathering wood. Um, and when you start to burn that fire as a prince, you have all your, resources built up.
Makes total sense. I I want to come back to the prince because we're going to wrap up around this, and then we'll do king another time. Sorry, choking a little bit. Um, excuse me. So a prince is about other, but still has that sense of self of being a knight. And I think that's part of the bigger difference between that and a king. And I see this a lot with guys who are conflicted and they got a foot in two worlds. And that's a warning, I think, to guys listening to this, that crossover space is always the most tenuous, the most dangerous. You also see it on the other side from prince to king. We call that the midlife crisis,
Yeah.
right? There's a lot of dangers that happen. It can it can be an opening, right? Or it can be a shattering. And it depends how you approach that. So getting to this point where it's time to be a prince, like move into it as with certainty and clarity. And I've seen this a lot with guys who don't do that. And then the woman they're with is caught in the crossfire. She's needing to get you to be a prince because she's ready to be a princess. And oftentimes it revolves around a woman um, who's sort of forcing our hand, having to make a decision.
And forcing a knight to become a prince never works out.
No, inspiring him to become a
Exactly.
prince.
Well, exactly. And a knight who's moving into princehood and becoming that prince looks for mentors.
Mm-hmm.
They're not done soaking in knowledge and experience, but they're doing it for a different purpose. I think that's the distinction between the two.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and before we wrap up, I want to encourage guys who may be, towards the end of knighthood. Maybe you're early, maybe you're early 20s, and the guys around you, some of them at least, are in the middle of their knighthood, and they're going to be there for a while. That's okay. You're not crazy for thinking that, you want to start moving on to your purpose, and that you're feeling restless over this stage that you're in, but you feel like you're moving out of. You're in that transition process. Lean into it. It's a sign of growth.
And for women listening who are with a knight that's on the cusp of being a prince, right? Hold your ground, like draw the line. And that doesn't mean to drag him across. But I see that the men who move into that prince space with clarity is with a woman who, in a healthy way, gives him an ultimatum, right? Your female partner, I'm not going, or any partner, I'm not going to slow this thing down for you. I have to be me and do me and go into this next phase. And, it's the Jerry Maguire story. Remember the movie Jerry Maguire?
It's been a while.
Should watch, anybody listening watching it. It's a great example of a man who needs to become a prince and he's stuck in knighthood and he's with all the wrong women. And finally he's with this woman who says to him, my son and I need a man. I mean, I forget exactly what she says. I need you to be that man. And if you can't be, then you can't be with me. And that ultimatum gave him something to really move towards. Now, he was much older. I mean, I think in the movie he was in his 30s. But yeah, to women out there, like, hold your ground, hold your values, get your needs met. And maybe it's not with him. Maybe the answer is no, he's not ready and he needs more time to bake.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking forward to moving more into that stage. Again, right now I'm more learning about it through like your experiences and the I'm peeking over that ledge onto to what's in store. But I really hope other guys who heard this, whether they're in later stages and are relating back and remembering the value of that time, or guys who are listening now and are in it, and just appreciate it for what it's worth, because it's a very important time and it's very special. There's a very special energy to it.
Absolutely. And I just wish I had a roadmap when I was, your age, even a language to frame my experience. For me, it was just one big blur. And I think part of the work that we're doing and we're offering to the guys listening is, this has been going on for thousands of years. You're not alone. You're unique. There's never been or will be another you. So you have to take this with a grain of salt and make it work for your life. But you're also not that unique that you're the first one to go through this. And there are stages to the development, and just honor the stage. And that's what it's all about. So to all of our knights, princes, kings out there, keep going. And the next podcast, I'd like to talk about what it means to rise up and be the king. So thanks as always for being on my podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Take care.